Welcome everybody to another Meetup Live event. My name is Emily. I'm the Marketing Events Coordinator at Meetup. Today we are joined by special guest, OwnTrail founder and CEO Rebekah Bastian. You will learn to take stock of your professional background in a way that goes beyond your resume. You will think through where you want to go in your career and how to plan how you'll get there. You'll learn to identify your soft and hard career skills to craft your narrative of your career journey that makes your next move easier. You will leave with a renewed vision and boost of confidence to reach your goals. So before we get into it, I'm just going to go over a few guidelines and the agenda. So this video will be recorded, but don't worry, you will not appear in the video. You can only see us, we can't see you. There is also a mute courtesy. Your audio will be muted throughout the event, but we want to hear from you, so please put your questions in the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen, and we will go through those at the end of the event. Closed captioning is also available. To turn it on, you could just click on the live transcription icon at the bottom of your screen and select your preference. And this is the agenda for today. We're just doing a quick introduction now for 5 minutes, and then we will go into the presentation with Rebekah for 40 minutes, and then we will have the Q&A session at the end for 15 minutes. So before I let Rebekah take it away, I'm just going to give her a quick introduction. So Rebekah Bastian is an entrepreneur, author, artist, tech executive, wife, mother, and aerial acrobat, lots of different things. After spending 15 years at Zillow, with roles including VP of Product and VP of Community and Culture, Rebekah started OwnTrail based on her award-winning book, Blaze Your Own Trail. OwnTrail is the tech platform that combines an experienced graph of people's lives with the tools and community to help them achieve aspirational goals. So thank you, Rebekah, for being here with us, and I can't wait to see what you have for us in your presentation.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm going to share screen here. Hopefully you can see that, Emily.
Yep.
Okay, awesome. Cool. Well, thanks everyone for joining. I'm really excited for this. Really amazing outcome in terms of people joining. And I know that finding meaningful careers in a way that's really true to us is something that is relevant to a lot of people right now. So my plan is I'm going to tell you a little bit about my journey first, share some kind of frameworks that I think about in terms of career navigation, and then it'll become a little more interactive, and we'll do kind of a bit of a workshop as we do some reflection together. So yeah, let me tell you a bit about myself. You of course did hear the nice intro that Emily gave me, and it looks something like this. Like if you were to look at my resume or my LinkedIn, you would see something that looks, pretty linear and, successful. So, from degrees to jobs, promotions, achievements that I have had, you can take a look at that and you're like, oh yeah, she's killing it, which, none of that's a lie. Like these things have all happened. But it's a really kind of limited view of what my path has really looked like. So, for example, it doesn't show anything about my personal life. And I'm a firm believer that our personal and professional lives are so inherently intertwined that looking at one without the other can actually be pretty misleading. There's things that have certainly impacted my professional life, like places I've moved or, just experiences I've had, like having kids, for example. That's something in my personal life that's not on my resume, but like it really changed the way I show up at work, the way I show up as a leader. I've made decisions about like major career decisions that really had nothing to do with the career themselves, but more about the things that were happening in my personal life. And so I think the resume doesn't necessarily indicate that, but it's important. It's an important part of that story, both of where I've been and where I'm going from here. You also don't see the things that didn't go as planned. There's so many times, I've had plenty of just kind of outright failures. We all have, so you try something and it just completely blows up or doesn't work. But then also I think when you see things like promotions or new jobs or opportunities, you see the yeses, right? People that have told me yes towards things I was working towards in life or have offered them up. I know for me and probably for most people, there's probably, somewhere between 10 and 100 times more no's than there are yeses. But when you look at the kind of highlight reels of my professional journey, you don't see all those no's, and they're a really important part of it. And some of them were definitely for the best also. So that's a big part of the story. And then the other thing is where I'm headed next. So you might look at that kind of linear looking picture of my career journey and assume certain things about it. Like, what are the next linear steps that I might take from there? But, or I might do that about myself too, right? We do have some of those kind of limiting beliefs in terms of where we're going next too. Well, I've been told there's this ladder that I'm supposed to be climbing the rungs of. And so the next step is logically this. And that's not always true if we're really following what we're most passionate about, or, being open to opportunities. So I mention all of this because at the end of the day, like there really isn't this idea of a right path. We are oftentimes sold an idea of a right path, and there's plenty of inputs that indicate that, but in reality, there isn't one. And the cool thing about that is when there's not a right path, you can't really get it wrong either. And so that I find to be incredibly freeing because it just opens up so many more possibilities. So I want to pause, and I have a question for all of you, which is, and Emily, if you can bring up the first poll we have here, is I'm curious how many of you have felt that there was some right path you're supposed to be on, that you're supposed to know where you're going and how you're going to get there, and that there's going to be clean and linear. So I would love to hear via this poll, how many of you maybe felt that way before? How many of you still feel that way, or how many of you never had that kind of preconception? So take a moment to vote here. I just realized I don't think I can see the poll results, but I would love to know what they are. So maybe you can tell me later, or put it in the chat or something, Emily. But yeah, is there a way for me to see those? Well, anyway, I'll keep going, but look forward to seeing what that was. Cool. So, I see it. Okay, 63% of people used to feel that there is some kind of right path that they're supposed to be on. So, and 21% of you don't feel, or do still feel that way. So, 40-ish% have grown past that. So that's good. Congratulations, I think. And 16% of you are so self-actualized that you never actually had the misconception of a single right path. And that's delightful as well. So anyway, we're going to keep going, but that I would love to kind of see how that evolves for you as we keep talking. So the reason I mention this, because this is something that I've heard a lot, as I've grown through my own leadership career, but also just friendships and just the people I've connected with along the way, I have really noticed that there is this kind of idea that you're supposed to be following the ladder. And the reason that we oftentimes feel that way is because we look around and we see these seemingly linear, clean, perfect paths from everybody else on social media and LinkedIn. And it's really easy to feel like you are the only one on this kind of winding, bumpy journey, and you need to straighten it out. That is, of course, not true. We, pretty much everybody has those winding journeys, but we don't hear about them so much. And as I was thinking about this idea of like, what is the right path and why do we all feel so constrained by that? In my own journey, I actually ended up writing a book about that, or a book that kind of examines that, called Blaze Your Own Trail. And it's a choose your own adventure exploration of decisions and paths through life. So I don't know how many of you know those choose your own adventure books from childhood, but you kind of make a decision at the end of each chapter that tells you where to go next. And the punchline is that, no matter what decisions you make, like you don't always have control over where it's going anyway. And we're all going through these different kind of unpredictable, sometimes difficult, oftentimes surprising paths through life, but also that we can be okay through all of that. It's not always going to go exactly as planned, but really kind of embracing the journey is part of the goal there. And then as part of my unplanned journey after writing the book, I actually, I'd signed with my publisher, was waiting for the book to come out, and I started playing around with what I thought might be a cool interactive book launch website. And that's actually what turned into OwnTrail, which is the company that I founded about 3.5 years ago and ended up leaving a very comfortable and enjoyable executive role at Zillow, where I'd been for 15 years, in order to build out this company. And the premise of OwnTrail is really about helping people own their stories and share them in a way that is kind of busting that right path narrative, right? Where people are sharing where we've really been, where we really want to be going across our personal and professional lives in a way that goes so much deeper than a lot of those highlight reels that we see out there. So along those lines, this is my trail from OwnTrail, and this is what my path really looks like. So you remember like the different kind of diagrams I did a few minutes ago of my path. This is what it looks like on OwnTrail. And I really see this as the most authentic version of me in digital form. You know, it includes everything from failing out of college to getting degrees in mechanical engineering. It includes, you know, trying to and starting a family, different accomplishments and side projects I've had along the way. But then it also includes where I am right now and what I'm aspiring to. And what's powerful about this is, you know, in addition to, it's cool to share my story, I think, with other people, but it's given me a lot of confidence in my own journey, in both embracing all of the twists and turns that I have experienced. And I think by really owning and embracing those experiences, we both build confidence in who we are, but it also sheds some light on what we're bringing, what we want to take with us going forward, and which things maybe aren't serving us that we want to leave behind. And so, yes, this is a career workshop, but when I think about our career journeys, I think about them as being this really kind of holistic encompassment of, you know, our entire lives. And I think ideally, I hopefully I'll figure this, but ideally we are living a life that, you know, work is part of our life, as opposed to life is kind of a part of our work. So in kind of reframing it that way, then hopefully we can all find more fulfillment going forward as well. So as I talk about, there's no one right path. You can go any way you want. That's very open, which in a lot of ways can be really freeing, but also it's a little overwhelmingly open. So it's like, okay, well, which way do I go then? So I just want to share kind of a few frameworks that have helped me as I think through that. And then we'll go into more of the kind of the reflection that we can all be doing together. So the first framework I like to think about is this kind of triangulation of a few questions that you can ask yourself. And, you know, as we go forward, there will be opportunity to create your trail and own trail if you want, or write things down on paper. If you feel like jotting down any ideas as we go along here too, you're welcome to, of course. But the questions that I like to ask here are, first of all, what are you passionate about? Oftentimes, oftentimes we have the answer to that. We know what we're passionate about, but sometimes if that's not a readily available answer to you, I like to think about what are the activities I do, or, you know, thoughts or whatever experiences that give me energy as opposed to draining energy. And if you start paying attention to when you feel more energized in your life, then that can oftentimes be indicative of where those passions really lie for you. The next question is what you're good at. And it's not, I mean, yes, the things you've done professionally in your past that you have experience with might be things that you're good at, or like something you've gotten a degree or certification in, or, you know, there's a lot of things that you can point to on your resume that tell you what you're good at. But then that's just one piece of it. There's so much more also. And so everything from like, you know, kind of the soft skills to just like inherent skills that you haven't had the chance to maybe work on professionally or have the certification around, but that are still part of you. So it could be anything from, you know, being good at like, bringing people together and building community, analyzing complex data, solving problems in a creative way, really feeling empathy for other people's experiences, you know, being able to communicate through writing. There's so many different things there. And so really thinking about those skills and let yourself feel proud of what you're good at, right? I know we live in a world where we're not always told to you know, brag about what we're good at, but let yourself acknowledge that and think about those. And then the third piece is really where you're needed. And where you're needed can sometimes be as simple as like a job description that you might apply to, or you know, an opportunity at work that you might raise your hand for, right? So something that's already been defined. But oftentimes where you're needed isn't something that has been cleanly listed out for you either. Sometimes it's seeing that there's a problem to be solved and realizing that you're someone that could help solve that. And so, thinking expansively about these three questions around your passions, your skills, and where you're needed, and then kind of triangulating where the intersection of those three lies. And when you do that, you can start to think directionally about where you might go next in your career, in a way that, who knows, maybe it is exactly the perfect next rung on the ladder and you're already working towards that. But oftentimes it's more of a jungle gym kind of a goal, and the rung might be over there somewhere and you hadn't even been looking that way yet. But I've certainly had success and seen a lot of people have success with finding passion and fulfillment when really triangulating these areas. Okay, so there's one framework. The next one that that has been really helpful to me throughout my career is the side hustle. So, and also just to name, like, I'm a big not fan of hustle culture. So I don't mean the hustle in terms of overextending yourself or any of that. But the side hustle is like, it's really about how do you explore different opportunities or different pathways without having to go 100% all into them right away. And so, working within a company, you can do that. I've done that a lot of times, especially when I spent, 15 years at Zillow. I started a lot of different projects, teams, initiatives as side projects. And then as they took off, as I realized that they were things that I was really passionate about, as I saw success, I was able to actually direct my career into those things more. So kind of an entrepreneurship experience there, where you're not necessarily changing companies or roles, but you're able to explore things and create new pathways for yourself within a company. There's also the external side hustle. So whether you're in a job or you're even looking for a job and you explore different projects and different ideas and do them for a while on the side until you realize that they stick. Going from being an employee to being an entrepreneur is a great time to try out a side hustle, because and it's nice to validate ideas and make sure that it's really the thing that you're meant to be doing before you make that huge change too. So we can talk more about this part in the Q&A if anyone's interested, because I think there's a lot of really cool examples of this. But allowing yourself to kind of experience the yes and of what you want to be pursuing, which is not like either or, but you're doing the thing that you're currently working on, and then also exploring alternatives can be a really powerful way to find what sticks. One more framework I want to mention before we go into more of the workshopping together is, this is something that's really helped me. So oftentimes when we're thinking about changes in our careers and in life, we can sometimes get an idea and feel really excited about doing it right now. Or that's actually that can sometimes be a really good scenario. The alternative is sometimes you're really pissed off about something and you want to make a change right away. And so, so those are kind of the reactionary kind of moments where I tend to be more of a reactionary person myself. I'll admit I'm a very once I get an idea in my head, I'm running with it kind of a person. But on the other end of the spectrum, it's kind of well, this isn't that bad, or, it could be scary to change, or, and then you get into kind of, or I'm not growing, but I'm comfortable. Those are some of the more kind of stagnant side of things. And I think it's really important to find a balance between the two, right? When we're too reactionary, then we might not think things through enough, or the thing that we're reacting to might have changed if we waited just a little bit. And when we're too stagnant, life is short and you have this one life to live. And so you don't want to be stagnant or complacent in something that's not going to give you that best life. So for me personally, I usually do this thing where if I'm feeling a big feeling about something I want to do, I'll usually put something on my calendar. And so depending on if it's oh, I'm so pissed off, I want to quit right now, that's usually a 6-month calendar moment for me. I want to wait and see how I'm feeling 6 months from now. And if I still feel the same, I'll make a change. If it's oh, with my startup, oh, I want to change my business model right now, maybe that will be a 1-week calendar moment where I do some research and talk with folks and let it sit with me for a little bit. So different timeframes for different kinds of decisions. But I think that the cool thing about kind of the put it on your calendar trick in terms of not being too reactionary or stagnant is that then it also takes some of the mental load off of the constant decision making for that period of time. And you just allow yourself to like do the research or see what unfolds. And then you're able to make that decision in a more informed way in the timeline that you decide is right. So kind of taking control over something that might feel big in the moment. Okay, so those are frameworks that have served me really well. So hopefully some of you have found some nuggets in there for you as well. And now we're going to do something totally different, which is really starting to kind of reflect on your own journeys. And so for those of you that are digitally inclined right now or able to, if you want to go to OwnTrail.com, that's my company, and that's a free tool to be doing this journey mapping. If you feel more like writing things down in the moment, and you can always go to OwnTrail later to create a trail with this, feel free to grab a pen and paper. Or if you have an amazing brain of just thinking and remembering things, go for that too. But we're going to start with that. And starting with just like something kind of simple, which is just really quick without thinking too hard about it. What is the thing that you're aspiring to in your career in the next year? So I'm guessing probably a lot of people do have an answer to this in mind already, like something that you've been thinking you want. And so if you're on OwnTrail, what you'll do is you'll get started on OwnTrail from the homepage. You'll just enter your email address and password to create an account. You'll create your profile. All those fields are optional. And then if you're creating a milestone on OwnTrail, once you start your trail, you're going to pick one of these categories. And so, I've kind of directed you in the direction of a career-related milestone, since this is a career-related question, but you might pick a different category as well. But you'll choose one of those and you'll write a little bit about what is that milestone that you're working towards right now in your career. So you can add a title, you can add a description to it. You can set milestones to be visible to anybody on OwnTrail or only people that you're explicitly connected to. So there's privacy settings there. And yeah, just kind of think about what that is. So, and feel free to be working on this while I'm talking. I'm going to keep talking a little bit, but since people will be watching this video as well, so I don't want to leave too many gaping silences, but feel free to be writing it down. And it could be just a quick, like, I want a promotion, right? Like that's something that you've been working towards and you know what you want. It might be, a lot of people are currently unemployed and looking for their next role. So maybe it's like, I want to land this kind of a job. Maybe the kind of job you want is similar to the last one you had. Maybe it's something completely different, right? Maybe you want to be learning a new skill that lets you go in a different direction in your career. So a lot of different things there, but for this one, and we're going to get much more kind of reflecty and intentional about all of this, but to start with, I'm just wanting to kind of pay attention to what the thing is that first comes to your mind when you're thinking about that thing you're working on. And as you do this, you'll notice if you're creating this on OwnTrail, you might ask for help with that thing. Help beacons are a way that you can say what it is you need help with from the community, and people respond to those. So you'll see that in a step in this process as well. And we'll talk more about that later as well. But as you're all starting with kind of what is that one thing that you're working towards in the next year, which is, not next week necessarily, but a fairly short time horizon in terms of predictability of what might be next, right? And I would love to hear what kind of aspiration you added here. So what is that thing that you're working towards? So Emily, if you could pull up the next poll that we have here. Cool. So I'm curious, like how many of you, when I asked just kind of off the top of your head what that thing is that you're working towards, how many of you said something that has been on your mind for a while, that you've been working towards for a while? And how many of you said something that maybe you just started dreaming of recently, or even just in this moment as we're talking, something new came to you? So a new thing that hasn't necessarily been on your roadmap for a long time. And how many of you weren't sure what you wanted to add there? So yeah, and create that aspirational milestone for yourself on OwnTrail or on paper, and then let us know what type of milestone that was for you. Awesome. Okay, so more than half of you said that it was something that you've been working towards for quite a while, which I think is interesting. And then about a quarter of you, something that you had just started dreaming of. So what's interesting about the fact that, and I think that, like, I'm not surprised by these results. I think that seems about right, that more than half of us have had these goals that we've been working towards for a while. Sometimes that's really awesome. And of course, not all goals happen overnight. So a lot of them can be something that we're working towards for quite a while. Also, sometimes it's worth examining, like I personally have had goals that I had been like working towards for a while. And then once I started really examining, looking back on what has been the most fulfilling for me, looking at what excites me the most right now, then I start to revisit those, and sometimes they change. So sometimes under examination, it's good to just kind of revisit what those are. And are we still wanting and valuing the same things in our lives that we were when we first thought of that goal, however many years ago or whatever? So we'll keep going from there, but I think it's something good to think about. And then as we move forward here, we're going to move back. So we started with kind of, okay, quick top of mind, what's the thing you're working towards? But now I want to look back on reflecting on where we've been, because I think when we look backwards at where we've been, it can tell us a lot about where we want to be going. So again, on OwnTrail, if you're creating your trail on OwnTrail, then this is adding a new milestone or else writing it down. But thinking about at least one, maybe more experiences that really shaped who you are today. So this can be so many things for so many people, right? And obviously there's a million little experiences that have shaped who we are today. I mean, butterfly affected everything, right? Everything shaped who we are. But like, what are some of those really formative experiences for you? And so some of those happen in childhood, right? So, sometimes like moving to a new country or having, sometimes trauma we experience, or sometimes, different cultures that we've been immersed in, or, changes in family and different growth milestones or big things we've learned. Like there's so many things there, but like, when you look back, just really quick, kind of like, what are those most formative moments for you? And so I encourage you to add some milestones about that. And I'll get into this more in the next kind of prompt as well. But the spoiler alert is like, there's a good chance that these aren't things that you've shared online before. There's a good chance that those most formative experiences aren't necessarily something that I would see on your resume or your LinkedIn. There's a good chance that's not even something you've shared on social media, or maybe you've only shared it with very, very few people, even personally. So again, privacy in terms of, you can set, if you're creating milestones on OwnTrail, you can set those to be private, of course. And if you're writing it on paper, you can just keep it to yourself too if you want, or you could put it out there more. But I think when we think about those formative experiences, then we can also think about like, how have we historically reacted to those experiences, right? So in these big moments in our lives, how did we respond? How did that change the course of where we're going? Are there patterns that have evolved for you as you kind of experienced big things and then responded to those big things? How do you navigate that? And so spend a little bit of time writing about that and thinking about that. And of course, there's always going to be more. Again, if you're using OwnTrail for this, you can add more milestones at any time. You can rearrange them in any order. So you don't have to remember everything in perfect chronological order right now. But naming some of those big experiences can help you identify really like what are the big things that brought you here. And there's kind of idea actually, so I have kind of a silly habit of quoting books that I've never read based on the titles, but one that I love to quote based on the title is what brought you here, no, what got you here won't get you there. And I mean, I've heard someone talk about it too. I know a little bit, but like, so there's these things that brought you to where you are right now. They're not necessarily the same things that are going to get you to your next step, but they can definitely inform, where that next step might be. So feel free to keep writing about all of this. I'm going to bring up another kind of angle to think about with this, which is, what is something that makes you good at your job, but that you wouldn't know from your resume? And again, I touched on some of this with that last question too. But when you see your resume or your LinkedIn about what makes you good at your job, it's going to be like, oh, I have this certification, I have this I've had this role, I've had this, these technical skills or whatever. And yes, those are all true, but those might not be the things that actually make you the best at your job. Like grit, being able to persevere through hard things, and like, what have those hard things been? Like, sometimes that's what makes you really killer at your job, or like being able to really understand where someone else is coming from and kind of maybe design experiences or communities or products or whatever based on that. Like, sometimes the empathy that you take with you into that kind of a role is something that you can't learn in any kind of school or on the job training, right? Like, that's something that comes from lived experience. I mentioned for me becoming a parent, like I showed up completely differently at work, and I think way better once I had kids. It just put things in perspective for me. It opened up a level of empathy also. It helped me prioritize and be more efficient. So there's a lot of things like that. I mentioned like travel, different cultures, different perspectives that you're coming from. Like, those are all things that you can be bringing with you into your work. And so add milestones about those things if you're creating your trail, or write down what some of those experiences are if you're jotting down notes here. Because I think when you're looking towards your next career steps, and also just life steps, both owning your story and your full story, not just the scrubbed down version that goes on your neatly formatted resume, but like your real story, really owning that is important in terms of how you tell that story to open up opportunities. But again, also it's going to help you to think through what those opportunities that you're looking for might be as well. So one more kind of reflection as we're looking backwards here. And these can be really interesting. So it's this idea of like, what are these things in your life where your value judgment has changed a lot over time? So for example, what were times where something felt really negative in the moment and then turned out to be like the best thing that could have happened, right? Or vice versa. Like, what are times where you got exactly what you thought you wanted and then it turned out really not to serve you? So these, like, when you think about those moments, those can actually be indicative of some really meaningful milestones in your journey as well. And these are definitely milestones that you can learn from as you're looking forward. So in terms of like experiences that felt negative, sometimes that's something like being laid off or losing a job, ending relationships, not necessarily a career thing, but it's oftentimes endings can open up new beginnings, right? Or different disappointments can open up new opportunities. And then in terms of the vice versa, I hear from a lot of people, especially career-wise, there's a lot of stories I've heard of, I wanted this job so badly and then I got it and it turned out it was totally not right for me. Or I wanted this opportunity so badly and I got it and it turned out that it made me miserable, or, those kinds of things. And so naming those can help us to be, kind of both more intentional about where we're going, but also it can, once you have those experiences, then sometimes the highs don't necessarily feel as high, but the lows don't feel as low either, because you know that the value judgment can really change over time. So these have all been, or these most recent prompts here are about looking back on our journeys. And that's something that you can keep doing forever. You'll always keep remembering more moments and things that you want to jot down. And so I encourage you to keep thinking about those past milestones. If you're creating your trail on OwnTrail, keep adding them. You can add them in any order at any time, and you're never done with reflecting. I still keep thinking of more things that I want to be adding to my trail as well. And if you're writing down, keep jotting those down as they come to you. I'm a big fan of, do you know, by the way, that we're 50% more likely to make things happen when we write them down? So I'm a huge fan of kind of like the journaling or I've actually never made a vision board in my life, but I think I've done a lot of like analogous to vision boarding things in terms of writing down where I'm going. And certainly that's a lot of what OwnTrail is for. So keep writing those down. And then I'm going to move forward into the present tense as well. So let's look at where we are right now in our lives. Starting with one more poll, Emily, if you can pull up the next poll. just curious how professionally fulfilled you are right now. This is just kind of the not at all to very much scale. And, for people that are in between jobs, I don't know, maybe you feel very fulfilled not having to work for a little while, or maybe you're feeling unfulfilled that you want to be finding that new role. And if you're in a role right now, kind of what is your level of fulfillment there? So I'll drink water for a second while you answer that. All right, let's see what the results are here. Okay, so only 8% of people are very fulfilled in their professional life right now. 22% somewhat. Okay, so pretty well distributed, but a little bit skewed more towards the not that fulfilled, which is not that surprising, right? Especially, I think this probably correlates a lot to the, did you think there was a right path you're supposed to be on? Because I think oftentimes when we're following what we think is supposed to be the linear right path, that can oftentimes lead to less fulfillment because we're being less intentional about what those things are that we're doing, and we're kind of following the steps or the check boxes that we thought we were supposed to. So it's good to pay attention to that, because I imagine if I put up a poll that said, how many of you want to be super fulfilled, it would be close to 100% yes, right? So let's work towards that more. So looking at where you are right now in your professional life. First, even though we're looking at careers, let's take a step back and think about what you're doing right now in your life that brings a sense of fulfillment outside of work, right? Or in work. I guess it would just be what is fulfilling you the most in your life right now? So that could be something that's happening in work or outside, but name that thing. And if you're creating your trail on OwnTrail, you can add a present tense milestone that says what that thing is that's really fulfilling to you right now. Or just write it down. But I think naming the things, and this kind of goes back to that Venn diagram I was showing you about the triangulation of passion and skill and opportunity. This is the passion piece. I think to me, passion and fulfillment tend to go hand in hand, because when you're doing things you're passionate about, and passion doesn't have to be this ecstatic, oh my God, I'm so passionate about this, but what are the things that are really filling you up right now? And naming that as a present tense milestone. And I would suggest carrying that with you. If it's something that's fulfilling you, let's find ways to keep doing that or do more of it, right? Then as we're looking at kind of where we are right now in our lives, what's something that you're working on right now that you're proud of? So, and it might be similar to the thing that's fulfilling you, but, we all have a lot of things going on in our lives. And so think about which ones of those are something that you feel proud of that you're doing right now. It could be, that you're job hunting. It could be that you're being rigorous around, submitting a resume once a day or something. If you're, going to work, it could be that you're making time to go for a walk at lunch every day because, having that physical outlet's important to you. There's a lot of different ways, small to big things that you could be proud of. It could be a huge project that you're working on that you're proud of too, of course, but there should be something there, right? And then looking on the other side of that, what's something that you're working on right now that you could use some help with? Maybe it's the same thing. Maybe you're proud of it too, but oftentimes when there's something that we're working through or working towards in our lives, we don't do it all alone. If you're creating your trail on OwnTrail right now, I mentioned this before, but there's these help beacons with each milestone that you create. And it's kind of like a bat signal to the OwnTrail community that lets you call in the help that you need. But whether you're doing this on OwnTrail or writing it or whatever, I think that practicing asking for help, and so that could be asking for help on OwnTrail through help beacons. It could be reaching out to somebody to ask for help. You could do that one-on-one. You can do it through different social platforms. You can do it through Meetup groups, are a great opportunity to find people that can be helping you with things. But really thinking about what it is you need help with, because a lot of times we can be oh, I need help. But if you're not intentional and specific about what it is you need help with and calling that help in, then oftentimes we either don't get any help or we get the wrong kind of help. And that can be really frustrating as well. So create a milestone or write down a moment about something that you are currently working through or towards that you could use some support with. So again, here, this is about where we are right now in the present, and that probably has, that contains multitudes as well. And so you can keep thinking about those present tense milestones. And now, so keep doing that and come back to that. But now I want to think about going back to the future. Yes, I totally made it Back to the Future reference, but so we started off thinking about like, okay, what's the one thing that you're working towards in your career this year? And everyone wrote that down. A lot of them were things that you've already been working on for quite a while. So now that we've spent some time reflecting on where we've been and where we are right now, I want to go back to that. And this time thinking a little bit bigger. So spend a moment and think about what your ideal life might look like 5 years from now. And that can be a lot of different things. It obviously could be the same, or at least include the thing that you had originally shared about the aspiration that you're working towards in your career in the next year. It could be, 5 years, you have more time to accomplish things. So it could be, even more kind of career aspirations that you've already been working towards, maybe a series of promotions or a really big career pivot, or, adding some major new skills. It can also be things like, aspiring to having more work-life balance, or having more confidence, or being more intentional about how you spend your time, things like that. Or and also totally can include your personal life too. Like, let's not compartmentalize personal and professional here, because they are so intertwined. But what does that kind of ideal state look like for you? Maybe you're on a beach and you're done working. You kind of figure that all out. I love that one too. And then as you think about that, there's a good chance that you, as many of us do, have started thinking about barriers to get there, because those doubts can start to creep into our minds. And so what are some of those barriers that occur to you? You don't have to create a milestone about the barriers necessarily, but it unlocks some more thinking, which is like, okay, what would prevent you from getting to that kind of ideal state 5 years from now? Some barriers are things like what I consider kind of external barriers. So like time or money or connections or opportunities, right? Like things outside of you that you feel like might not add up to create those opportunities. And then also very real are sometimes internal barriers. So things like fear or self-confidence, or, just the determination, like things inside of you that might hold you back from reaching those goals. The reason I think it's helpful to list out what these barriers are is because then you can start to think about how you might move past them. So think through how could you overcome those barriers that pop into your head? How might you work around them? What are some mini steps you could take towards those bigger goals? So like, for example, say I wanted to, say I have this goal that 5 years from now, I have a New York Times bestselling book on the market. And that's a really big goal. And there's some things that are in my control and many things that are out of my control there, right? But how might I break that down into different steps? So like first, just like writing another book and having milestones around that. So maybe that's a milestone, an aspirational milestone in itself, is like finish a draft of a next book. And then maybe there's a milestone around like find an amazing publisher for it. And then there's a milestone maybe around like building my platform more or something. And that all kind of lead towards that. So like by having mini milestones or like steps that I could take, or maybe just practicing my writing more so that it can get better, so that it, so that I can achieve that aspiration. So there's lots of things there. So as you think about like, what is that state you want to be in 5 years from now? What could hold you back? Maybe you want to add a few milestones along the way. So first of all, put it out there. Put that big audacious goal out there. It can feel scary. It can feel, bold, or all the things that are scary about putting your big dreams out there. But honestly, the best way to make these big goals happen is to put out into the world. Tell somebody, put it on your trail on OwnTrail, write it down, all the things that can make it kind of create your intention around that and hold you accountable to achieving it. And then also share those milestones that will help you along the way to get there, and put those out into the world too. And by telling people what those goals are that you have and what those milestones are that will help you get there, not only are you, to whatever extent you believe in like manifestation or whatever, we could get into a whole discussion about that, but it also is like, well, then you're top of mind for people that might be able to help, that might be able to open up opportunities, make connections, give advice. Like that's how you call in help, is by putting your goals out there. So as you're sharing these milestones, ask for help with them as well. And yeah, see how that feels to put it out there. And so if you've been creating your trail on OwnTrail this whole time, then I encourage you to publish it and put it out there. If you've been writing down your goals, maybe like plan the next time you're hanging out with some friends or family, like share what those milestones are that you've been talking about, especially the ones that you're working towards. And I'm curious how this feels. So we've been spending some time sharing things that we're not used to sharing necessarily on online, on a webinar with a lot of people, all these things. And I added some, like maybe you feel something completely different than the choices in this poll, but I would be curious to hear how this activity has felt to you in terms of the reflection and and just kind of getting real about where you've been, where you are, and where you're going. So this one's multiple choice. You can feel many of these feelings at the same time, of course. And then from here, we're going to also open it up to Q&A. So I'm excited to hear what people are wondering about. But Emily, if you want to show these poll results. Vulnerable is the big one. Yes, exciting and eye-opening. I love that. And difficult. It can definitely be difficult. Well, I mean, I really appreciate that so many of you have actually like stepped into that vulnerability, because that I know can be scary, but also powerful. I'm just throwing up a couple QR codes on here. If any of you want to, so obviously everything you've been doing on OwnTrail has been free, but if you want to tap into the paid functionality, you can use the code Meetup for 25% off. Here's a link to my trail. I'd love to connect with you all on OwnTrail. And then also a friend of mine has a platform called Teal that's all about getting help with your resume and your job search. So I wanted to throw that on here too, because since we're thinking about career navigation, that can be a really helpful resource as well for those of you that are taking the next step towards that. So Emily, do you want to share some of the questions that have been coming in with me?
Yes, hi, that was amazing. I'm gonna rewatch this recording after and do it all on my own. That's kind of a call out too for anyone who joined late or left. Well, if they left early, they can't see this, but they can get a recap of this in a few days on our blog at meetup.com/blog. But yes, we have some questions coming in, so we can get into that. I'm also posting your links in the chat. So whoever, if you can't scan the QR code for some reason, they're also in the chat. And I am also putting the social media links to OwnTrail and so that they can follow along there.
Awesome.
Second, just sending these out. All right. Now let's get into some Q&A. Let's see. First, we have Claudia. She said, hi, do you think reframing the path helps to build confidence?
Yeah, I totally do. I mean, I think that, just to use like an extreme example, not really an example, but like if there's something that we might feel kind of embarrassed by or ashamed of in our journey, and like those are kind of extreme terms, but like, for example, like having a career gap, right? So that's not like a shameful thing, of course, but like some people are like, oh, like I feel self-conscious, I guess is a better term for like having a gap in my career, or I feel self-conscious for having moved jobs a couple of times in a short period of time, or all the other things. I think when you share the full story about why those things happened, where you've been, what you've made it through those experiences, what you've learned, all those things, it goes from something that you might feel self-conscious or embarrassed by to something that you can feel proud of because it's part of your story and it's made you who you are. And that confidence is honestly really important as you're convincing other people to be confident in you as you're looking for new opportunities. So yeah, I definitely find that to be a helpful tool.
Yeah. And seeing that other people have been through these ups and downs too can kind of give you some confidence that if they could do it, you could do it too.
Exactly.
Let's see. Anna Lee asked, how about when people want to make some changes but have no idea what to do? Do you have any advice?
Yeah, I mean, that's where, I mentioned kind of the framework of thinking through your passions and skills and the opportunities there. But I also think getting to know other people's stories is really powerful there, right? So like, for example, maybe you've made it through points A, B, and C on your journey so far, and you're like, well, what's D and E and F, right? So talking with other people or looking at other people's trails that had similar experiences up until yours, and then seeing all the different paths that they might have taken from there, I think can be incredibly powerful, right? Because there's no one right path, right? So just because someone maybe went through the same series of steps to get to where, to where you are right now, there's so many different places that they could have gone and that you could go from there. And so I think those stories can really help open up ideas for you. And especially, sometimes the identities we hold can be an important component of that as well. And so seeking out people that maybe share those identities and have had similar experiences and learning where they went next can sometimes open you up to ideas that you might have not even thought of.
Yeah, it's so inspirational to see how other people have made it, like how their journey has gone. And it could take all different loops.
Totally.
Anonymous asked, it's a lot to manage a full-time job, side hustle, family, and social life all at the same time. How did you manage to do that?
Yeah, it is a lot. I mean, I tend to have a high capacity for things that fill me up with energy. Like if I'm doing something that's not exciting to me, then I just feel exhausted by it and I don't have very much capacity. When I'm filling my life with things that are fulfilling, not all those things are always going to be fulfilling either. Like, I'm not pretending that like, oh, you could just create like the perfect exciting life, but like at the very least the side hustle should be something that energizes you, right? Because like, why are you doing it if it doesn't meet that criteria of giving you energy? And so oftentimes, like if there's a side thing that gives me energy, then I find extra capacity for it. And then hopefully the things like social life fill you up too, if give you energy. The job and the family aren't always as much of like you can decide, like you're like, oh, I'm not energized by my kid having a meltdown right now, I'm just not going to do that. But so those ones you don't get to negotiate quite as much, but at least the things in your life that the side hustle, and then also just like making it be for a finite period of time. So you can't side hustle something forever. That's just not sustainable. But like, what if you tried it for a month or two and see how that feels, and like carving out a little extra time for that period. I mean, honestly, like when I wrote my book, for example, which was a side hustle, like I literally wrote it on my phone while putting my kid to sleep at night, because my younger kid was in this phase where like he wouldn't go to sleep unless I was sitting in this chair in the corner of his room until he fell asleep. So I would just sit there in the chair every night, like working on my book on my phone. So like, because it energized me and I was excited about it. So you can find those little moments of time for the things that excite you, I think.
I love that. Great advice. Charlotte asked, what if you're having a tough time deciding on which goals? There are so many options.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's time too, right? So sometimes it's opportunistic. Like say you have several different goals that you're excited about, and maybe you're like feeling out or trying out different things at a time. There's not always the opportunity to do each one either. And so sometimes like opportunities will decide that for you. And sometimes you pick, and then if you're like, oh, I kind of wish I was doing this other thing that I had been aspiring towards, then you can kind of pivot there too. A lot of these decisions aren't necessarily forever definitive decisions, but you can try them on and see how that's working. And then and sometimes even before making a decision or going down a certain path, you can even try it on mentally, right? Like you can say, I'm making this decision, and just sit in that for a few days and see how it feels. Do you feel disappointed? Do you feel excited? Right. And so there's like, that's something that I do a lot, or even like, because I'm a very like verbal processor, I'll make the decision and tell a bunch of people that I made it and then see how that feels. And like, all I've done is tell people, and then I can go back and be like, actually, I changed my mind. So just trying on and seeing how those different paths feel about like the different goals you're working towards can sometimes help you decide as well.
Yeah, people's reactions can tell you a lot.
Yeah. Totally.
You learn a lot just by doing that. Let's see, we got a question from Anonymous. They asked, do you have any advice for someone constantly getting refused or ignored when applying for jobs?
I think that, I mean, this kind of sucks, but like a lot of it, especially in this job market, is about like making inside connections. So I think networking can be helpful there. And it's not like, and I'm not a big fan of like transactional networking. I think like that doesn't really feel great to anyone, but if you talk to enough people about your goals, then, in a way where you're like, but also I just want to be friends with this person, or like, I'd like to see if there's ways I can help them too, or like, friends that I want to hang out with, but just like kind of putting it out into the world and putting yourself in enough situations. And like, for me, like the idea of going to a networking event actually totally freaks me out. Like, I don't like those, but I do love meeting up with like one-on-one with people, or small groups or whatever. And so like, putting yourself out there, making connections, and then seeing where you can have ins. Because sometimes like, it doesn't even have to be someone high up at a company, but like most, at least bigger companies, will have like employee referral programs where like resumes get looked at in a different way when they're referred by someone internally. So just finding people that can do that for you through like a series of just getting to know more people. Also, the cool side effect from that approach is that you end up making more friends, and that's fun. So it doesn't even have to be like, it's not purely just a transactional goal-oriented thing, but it's like, meeting cool people is cool. So I recommend it.
There's not really a loss in networking.
Totally.
If it doesn't work out with career, you could be friends. We got another question from Anonymous. They asked, how do you get past the fear of failure?
Well, I love that question. Because I have opinions on it. So I think I've kind of categorized 3 kinds of failure. So there's like life-threatening failure, right? Like if you fail, this could kill you kind of thing, like, jumping out of a plane or whatever, which I haven't done, and it seems fun too. So anyway, that kind of category where like, there's actually a threat to your existence based on it. Then there's like a threat to your comfort, stability. So like, maybe it's like, there's a financial or kind of outcome. So like, for example, like deciding to start a company is really scary, because if it doesn't work, then you could lose a lot of money from that, and you're stepping away from a comfortable salary or whatever, right? And so that financial kind of failure, or like other things that kind of impact your lifestyle, if you will, you can do math about that. You can kind of calculate what risks you're able to take and for how long and stuff. And then the third bucket is, I guess, like what other people think of me kind of failure. And that's the one I kind of recommend just pushing yourself through the most, right? Because it turns out that nobody's thinking about you as much as you're thinking about you, and no one's judging you as much as you are. And so, and everyone messes up. And like the idea of avoiding failure so other people don't think that you're a failure, I feel like is something that the more you push yourself through that, the more you get positive reinforcement that it's true. No one actually does care that much. And so it's usually a risk worth taking. So I kind of assess failure in those 3 ways, and then kind of have different rubrics for each.
I love it. Great advice. Thank you so much. Unfortunately, we're out of time. But thank you for joining us, everybody. And thank you, Rebekah, for your time and sharing this presentation with us. We're just going to share one more slide. If we could take away.
Oh, let me stop sharing. Sorry. Yeah.
That's okay. So Meetup is on TikTok, and you could check us out by following us at Meetup. And we post some really fun and engaging content. So please check us out. And as a reminder, this event is recorded, and there will be a recap on our Community Matters blog at meetup.com/blog within a few days. So we will have that out ready for everybody to watch. And thank you again for joining us. Thank you, Rebekah, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much for having me. Thanks for coming, everyone.
Bye.
I'm findable everywhere, so get in touch. Okay, bye.